So thank you for that, Bonnie, and thank you all for coming. It's going to be an interesting evening. As you can tell, it's an intimate crowd, but I think this is actually going to be an historic evening. I think this is going to be actually a historic workshop. I like to say that I've been thinking about going back to the moon for about 40 years. I was about 8 years old when Neil was there, living in Houston, Texas. And so going to the moon and going back to the moon were never really an option for me. It's what I had to do all my life. And so I've been in and out of science and then and now that life's focus, that life's effort is coming into a very clear focus for me. And um, we have a program both of workshops that we're extending as well as the distraction of why you're not running my slides. Thank you. Anyway, back to the introduction and progress. So we've been working on this for a while. This is going to be our 6th event. As many of you noted, the content of the event is going to be stellar. We have top scientists, top engineers. All 6 of our events have had cutting edge people, and that will continue to be the case. With the extension of the workshops from is this meaningful? Is now the time to go back to the moon? Is there a place to go? Into what is becoming the Lunar Initiatives, a much broader program that will take 3, 5 years or more to really build out as a complete system. But the vision is now crystal clear. And so it begins with the Lunar Initiatives, returning to the moon for all mankind. One of the first things I do for my clients is I get them to come up with a purpose statement. They're creating a startup company. What's the purpose of your company? And the purpose is something that will never change no matter what else does. If you're going to do the difficult work of creating a startup, you better be prepared to have some dark days and work really hard when nobody else believes you. And the purpose for the Lunar Initiatives, the reason I extended beyond just lunar superconductor applications, beyond just CubeSats, into the Lunar Initiatives, is our purpose is to engage the best and the brightest from all over planet Earth in addressing the most profound questions ever asked by humanity about the place in the universe and our expansion into it. And you'll see why that is actually the question that's in front of us starting now. As we ask those questions, as we attract the best and the brightest from all over planet Earth to participate in these live and virtual events and the special interest groups we'll be talking about, in doing that, we will be developing and proving new technologies in the 21st century that are only just now being imagined. And through their commercialization, bring the value and hope back to mankind. How many of you have watched the news lately? The human race could use a little hope these days. And space used to be part of that hope. That's evaporated from our lives. Most of us got into space because it was hopeful, because we thought it was the future. It's becoming the future again. So we're now back to the future. In the 20th century, cosmology was all about stars and how big the universe is. Stars and galaxies. Before Hubble, people thought the universe was about 1 galaxy big. In the 20s or so, he proved that it was a little bit bigger than that. And they spent the rest of the century trying to figure out just how big is it? How many galaxies are there? And they studied stars and stars and stars, and now black holes and many other kinds of things. We now know from Kepler, for a fact, knowledgeable people would have guessed this, but we now know for a fact that there are more planets than stars. If you want to understand the universe, if you want to understand man's place in the universe, if you want to understand why we're here, you have to study planets, not just stars. And we now know that those planetary systems are extraordinarily interesting. It's kind of a nice mix. Our solar system, our planetary system, has enough variety in it that it's a good model for others, but we know that other systems are far more bizarre than ours. And so we have a good laboratory, but we also know that it's just the beginning of what can be discovered. And so I think there's going to be an absolute renaissance, and even more. I don't think planetary science ever really got started. I think it's getting started now. And I think it's getting started in this meeting is my intention. That we're going to go back and attract a lot more money, a lot more interest, and a lot more excitement about space, about planetary science, and about where we're going and why we're here. And so those are two of them. We're going to have 3 core themes about this. The first one is our purpose, engaging people from all over planet Earth in one of the most important questions humans have ever asked. The second theme is new cosmology. astronomers around the world are going to have to redefine what their job is. It's not just stars. It's not just galaxies. The second theme is why the moon? And so this talks about finding life in the universe. And so we may or may not know where life is, but we know where the habitable terrains are. We now know, once again, for a fact. Some of this stuff is only months old. The fact that there were habitable terrains on Mars is only a few months old. MSL drilled into a rock and said this rock could have been formed in any lake on Earth. That wasn't known until this summer. Everybody thought that, reasonable people would have assumed that, but we now know for a fact that there were habitable terrains on Mars at some time, and I'm willing to believe that underneath those glaciers there are glacial lakes just like the glacial lakes on Earth. And there are almost certainly right now habitable terrains on Mars that could be explored. Similarly for the icy moons, Enceladus and Europa, we know they have liquid water oceans. We know there's organics on the surface. We know there are rocky cores. Almost certainly there are habitable terrains. And what we know on Earth, every niche that could possibly hold life, and many that we never thought could, life is everywhere on Earth. It would be an important negative finding if it was nowhere in the solar system. I suspect the more likely finding is that it's everywhere in the solar system. The most bizarre choice here is Titan. There's some evidence now that there's life on Titan, or life-like chemistry as far as I'm willing to go. As bold as I am, I'm willing to go with life-like chemistry at 90 Kelvin in liquid methane lakes. But that's an interesting result. That's new chemistry. That's something that no one ever guessed could possibly be the case. And if it's actually something so far as life, that's beyond science fiction. And it's in our solar system. And we now know enough to know that we should go back and look again. So that's following the flexible path to life in the universe. You follow the terrains. First you characterize the terrains, then you go looking for life. And they're throughout our solar system. And what we know is there are more planets like Titan than there are like planets like Earth. There are more Titans than Earth. There are more icy moons than Earth. If you want to understand life in the universe, you got to go to these destinations because there are a lot more of them than there are of us. And if there's life there, it dominates the universe. And so it's not an idle question. It's not an ivory tower sort of question anymore. Well, where does the moon come into this? Because even I would probably say there's no life on the moon and not any chance of really finding anything like that. But the moon, the third theme for the initiatives and the third theme for tonight's talk, is the moon is San Francisco in 1849. The 49ers came to California to find gold in the mountains. The last place they wanted to be was San Francisco. But that's where they bought their shovels. That's where they bought their mules. That's where they learned how to mine gold. If you want to make money, you want to build a city, you go to San Francisco, not the Sierra Nevada. The moon is the place where the technology is going to be developed, the trainings are going to happen, and we're going to learn how to live in these 90 Kelvin environments that are the gateways to all of these other habitable terrains beneath them and around them. So the moon is a place for doing in situ resource utilization, finding analogs for other planetary systems, and training people and equipment, proving technologies. Well, who's going to the moon? If you ask almost anybody, in fact, Pamela and I were at LEAG, the Lunar Exploration Analysis Group, and I had one of the speakers there I invited to come present, and he said, I'm not presenting, nobody's going to the moon. And this was one of the most sophisticated analysis groups in the world about what's going on in the moon and especially what's going on in the US. And the fact is nothing could be farther from the truth. The Chinese are going to land on the moon soon, this month, maybe weeks from now. And their 3 missions have been very successful so far, and they've got a 4th one lined up. And their plan, although they don't really announce it too loudly, but it looks pretty clear, they're going to fly once or twice every 2 or 3 years until they have a Chinese person waving a flag on the moon. They're not going to stop until they get there. And they've been very successful with their missions. They've been very focused and very successful, increasing their capability every time. The Russians are relaunching the Lunar program. They have 5 missions planned, 4 landers and an orbiter. Again, they plan to launch as early as 15. They will certainly probably launch by 16 or 17. And they've got a lot of pride on the line to prove that they're a spacefaring nation. They really can fly and land. So I don't think the Russians are going to back down. Whether they get 5 successful missions in 6 or 7 years, that's a stretch. They'll get 2 or 3. Even NASA is going, even though they don't say they're going back to the moon. Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, can remain in orbit for 10 years or more. So LRO can operate to 2025. And it's a competent platform. They're going to lose most of their science funding soon because everybody's going to lose their extended mission science funding soon. But unless they crash it into the surface, there's no reason in the world why that vehicle can't be there as an orbital platform to support other missions for another decade. The Resolve mission is now officially funded. and it's officially supposed to fly in 17 or 18, which, by the way, is the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11. I think NASA might notice that, and some people might want to support NASA for the 50th anniversary as our return to the moon. Whether anybody else notices it, we'll be talking about it. SLS, the Space Launch System, has recently announced that they're going to have CubeSats, lunar cubes, essentially. They're going to host 12 6-unit CubeSats and include them in their test flights. So, again, exactly when that's going to happen, we're not entirely sure, but even NASA, the most reticent of partners, is in fact going to the moon. Korea has an orbiter in plans, and they say they're well-funded. They have a lot of national pride in making that a success. And then the Google Lunar X Prize folks. I conservatively think 2 or 3 of them will try and fly once, and maybe 1 or 2 of them will fly twice or more. You add all that up, and it's not inconceivable to think there'll be 5, as many as 10 landed missions by 2020. And there'll be a swarm of 3 orbital platforms to support those missions. So there's going to be a lot of infrastructure at the moon over the next 5 to 6 years. It's on the books. It's planned. People are just unaware of it. We're going to change that. We're going to create a system where the scientists are aware that these opportunities are becoming available. We're going to make sure that the funders become aware that these opportunities are available. We're going to find commercial partners, and we're going to run workshops and special interest groups, because that's what we know how to do. For a relatively low cost, we can organize all these folks. And then when we get an army, we'll get to go. So the Lunar Initiative has grown into 5 core initiatives. The Lunar Workshops, and so we have the Lunar Cubes Workshop, we have a Lunar Superconductor Applications Workshop, which is about cryogenic polar applications and in situ resource utilization. And we're also going to have scientific opportunities in cislunar space to begin the process of opening up that new cosmology and the new talking about that. Lunar Special Interest Groups. Every workshop will have 2 or 3 or 4 special interest groups focused on very specific topics. And I'll talk more about how these things are organized in a minute. Lunar Challenges. Challenges like the X Prize unlock creativity. They create an opportunity for discontinuous disruptive technologies. There's almost no other way to encourage disruptive technologies except through things like challenges. You can't do it with grants. You can't do it inside an R&D organization at a university or a company. So we're going to sponsor challenges, starting small and getting to $1 million prizes. I believe we'll get there. And I'll explain how in a minute. Lunar Incubators. We're going to initially begin coordinating various investment groups and incubators and talk about what's unique about astropreneurs, what's unique about people who are trying to go to space and create startups around that. And in 3, 4, 5 years, there'll probably be a niche that we know how to fill better than anybody else. And at that time, we'll pull together our own investor pool and create a series of incubators and training. Or we may just be collaborating with a pool of others. But initially, starting in December, we're going to begin building these special interest groups and having monthly conversations about what's next, how do we begin. And then the International Geophysical Year, Lunar Geophysical Year, is 2017 is the 50th anniversary of Apollo, and it's the 60th anniversary of the International Geophysical Year, which got all this started. Sputnik was launched as part of IGY. The Van Allen belts were discovered as part of IGY. The Antarctic Treaty made Antarctica safe for scientific exploration in the heart of the Cold War. We're going to need something similar at the moon, both in terms of scientific organization and political organization. So the Lunar Workshops, as I mentioned, we have lunar cubes, lunar superconductors, and opportunities in cislunar space, SOCS. And our new partner, SETI, will be helping us organize SOCS as well. So we believe we can attract scientists and begin telling this story that the nature of cosmology, the nature of their industry, their career, is shifting. And it's shifting in a very positive direction. And there are many people who have felt left behind who are going to soon be, meaning 5 or 10 years for scientists, that's fast. I had a physics professor who somebody asked him about how his project was going. He said, oh, another 3 or 4 years. And he said, well, that's 10 years. And he said, any experiment worth doing takes 10 years. So for scientists, 5 years is very fast. So these transitions happen at science pace and human space. Some things will happen in internet time, but not everything. The Lunar SIGs, so we have the 3 annual workshop series. Lunar SIGs for special interest groups. So as I said, each workshop will have 2 to 4 special interest groups. So the workshops happen annually. Those special interest groups happen monthly, so that you have action. So this is another feature of the Lunar Initiatives and the way we do workshops and the way we organize things. We're about doing things. We're about writing proposals. We're about getting money. We are about building technology. We are going to get back into space and do things hook or by crook. And we're going to find like-minded people to do that. So the special interest groups, what is a special interest group? So it's 10 to 20 qualified people, more or less, in the early days. You can certainly run a very active group with about 20. 10 is good, a couple of motivated folks. We do a monthly webinar and online discussion group. And then the goal is for them to do at least one joint paper, at least one joint proposal, and they'll present at the workshop. So they'll be presenting annually, and they'll be collaborating on papers and proposals to move the topic forward. So we're going to pick topics, and I'll talk about some of the topics a little later. And then I'll do a much more detailed discussion of this on tomorrow's lunch and on Friday's lunch as well. So lots more coming this week in terms of details. So those are the special interest groups, and we should probably have 5 or 6 or even 8 of them up and running by January, learning how to run them well, learning how to get, it's basically the way we've organized ourselves. Bonnie pointed out that she and I have been running things that look like special interest groups for 5 or 6 years now. That's the way we do our consulting. I was the CEO of Flexure for a year before I met the owner. So we know how to do virtual teams. Lunar challenges. So each of the 3 workshop series will have 1 or 2 prize challenges. We'll be designing them in 2014 and bringing them online in 2015. We'll probably start with some small ones right away, some science challenges, that sort of thing, with modest purses and move in. But the trick of the challenges is you create the prize purse through a crowdsourcing game. And so the crowdsourcing makes it like a lottery. You pick a challenge that's going to take 2, 3, 4 years for somebody to win, and the prize goes up every year because you go back to the crowd and say, we raised $500,000 last year, this is how far they got, let's give them some more money for next year. And you make a game out of it, and you engage the entire population. Planetary Resources raised $1.5 million in 30 days. You can raise a lot of money through these things if you know how to engage a crowd, if you know how to communicate, if you know how to excite, if you know how to tell them this matters to them. This is the meaning of life in the universe, and it's only going to be the astropreneurs who are going to get us there. It's not going to be your government, even if you're in Russia. Even if your government is funding its missions, it's not going to be the government who's going to make the fundamental discoveries. So the crowdsourcing, the prize purse engages the general public. It gives you a way to raise $1 million long before you are the government and have $1 million to spend. Annual attempts, so we do an annual competition, and the top 3 will win. So you'll get door prizes every year for trying. The key prize will get bigger every year until somebody succeeds. So we'll do technical prizes, we'll do science prizes, and we'll do entrepreneurial prizes, astropreneur prizes, startup ideas, and startup competitions. And they'll be woven together. So for example, if we have a technical challenge like building a superconducting flywheel that fits in a 1-unit CubeSat, the teams that try to win that technical challenge will also need to submit business plans. They'll also need to explain, even if they're university teams, there'll be hypothetical business plans, but everybody will be asked, how would you make money out of this? And it will be part of the process. So we're going to weave all 3 of those things together. How does your technology advance science? How does your science advance technology? And how do we eventually commercialize this and bring it back for all mankind? Again, the reason to focus on challenge is this is how you instill disruptive technologies. This is how you move things forward at an exponential rate, not the linear rate of R&D. The other piece is if you flip it around and say, okay, maybe we do get someone like Boeing or a large investor to put up a big prize because they want to solve a particular problem, you only pay for success. You don't pay anybody until somebody solves your problem. Maybe you pay token amounts, but if you put up $1 million, you don't spend the $1 million. You put up a bond. You don't put up the real $1 million. You put up some sort of note that says if somebody wins my challenge, then I'll have to come up with the real money, or my insurance company will. So you put up clever ways of collateralizing this money, incentivizing this. You put up $1 million, people will spend 20, 30, $40 million trying to win that million. It accelerates, it magnifies the money that's vectored to the moon. My job, my goal, my passion is vectoring billions of dollars to the moon. And I don't really care why. It can be Google X Prize people, it can be scientists, it can be ISRU people. Shackleton Engineering thinks he's going to be mining on the moon by 2020. Well, God bless him. I wish him all the luck. And I'll sponsor him and help him and invite him to all these events and let him tell me what he'd like other people to solve. because it's wild-haired people like that who actually solve problems. And so for even the industrial partners, even the big business partners, they can be involved. They could put up something like $50,000, $100,000, $1 million prize for the right kind of project, because they know they don't pay until somebody solves the problem they need solved. And so we'll be working with lots of people who'd like to see problems solved, large and small. So the incubators, as I said, initially starting in January, we're going to start working with other people's incubators and other people's angel groups and start finding like-minded investors and trainers of entrepreneurs who would like to understand what's unique and different about astropreneurs. And there are going to be a variety of things, both in terms of 21st century capitalism, which is very different than 20th century capitalism. And there's going to be a need for a new way of creating and funding startups. So we're going to be looking into that, and then there's also going to be a lot that's new and unique about astropreneurs compared to regular entrepreneurs. So the way I envision an incubator, the lunar incubators, is that we're going to provide three things, and it will take us several years to figure out how to do this well and a decade to do it brilliantly. You need banking. Banking for entrepreneurs is different than banking for regular companies because half of them disappear before you're done. And so if you're going to give a credit card to an entrepreneur, you better know how you're going to work that. But they need cash flow. They need services. And so you've got to come up with a way to do that. Asset collateralization. So how do you collateralize the intellectual property? How do you collateralize what lives, even if the team only lives for 2 or 3 years? Something of their work product should live longer than that. So how do you do that? How do you capture that? And then entrepreneurial training. Again, being in business and being an entrepreneur are totally different things. So there's a lot of very different kinds of training that you need to be the kind of person who keeps coming back until you win, no matter what it takes. So we envisioned that our incubator would provide those things, and then what it would create is we would organize things into a virtual institute. So a virtual institute, what is that? Well, NLSI is a virtual institute. The Astrobiology Institute out of Ames is a virtual institute. And the idea is it's the special interest groups, it's the SIGs. You get scientists from all around the world to talk and think about problems you care about. So if you're an entrepreneur and I need to launch a company 5 years from now, and it's based on technology that never existed before, I'm going to need some science advisors. I'm going to need some engineering advisors. If I have to wait until I've got the money to pay them as my consultants, I'll wait a long time and probably never get started. One of the objectives is, guess what? You create a workshop series, you create special interest groups, and you attract the brightest minds to work on the problems you care about. We'll do that in the context of the incubators as well as our workshops. Open source and a maker community. Similarly, you can get the brightest minds. When we were at our challenge workshop not too long ago, it was people that, there are people who will work for free who you couldn't pay. And usually some of those are the smartest, best people you really want on your projects. So you create an open source community, you create a maker community for hardware, and you engage them in the kinds of problems you want solved that you can then build startups out of. And what do I mean by that? I mean special interest groups. I mean challenges. That's how you engage these people. We're already doing it, even though we don't have yet a specifically identified startup other than ourselves. And then you create startups. You create startups and you create skunkworks teams, because not all of these startups are going to be independent. Some of them are going to be inside other larger organizations, and they need to act like entrepreneurs. And so then the people you train will go to people who want to create startups and people who want to create high-performance teams, even inside a large organization. Now on to the International Lunar Geophysical Year. This one is a little different. The other 4 initiatives are ongoing every year, continuous processes that will not likely stop. The ILGY is the 60th anniversary of the IGY, and in the 50th anniversary of Apollo, and there are going to be a lot of people at the moon in 2017 and 2018. And so this is a way of organizing them. It begins with us doing a letter writing campaign, us finding some sponsors, us finding some people who think this is interesting. We've already spoken with various people, such as Igor Mitrofanov at the Russian Space Agency, and he thinks it's a great idea, and can easily imagine why Russia would want to, highlight Sputnik 60 years later or 50 years later. And so the achievements of the IGY, or Sputnik and the Van Allen belts, the Antarctic Treaty, which is one of the most successful treaty systems because it was written by scientists initially. It was originally created by scientists to make Antarctica a safe place for scientific research, and then it was adopted by the politicians and the political community. People tried to do that with the moon treaty, but it wasn't written by scientists. and it failed miserably, both because the time wasn't right, and again, it was written by politicians first and scientists never, basically. What came out of IGY was peaceful scientific use of Antarctica for 60 years, ever since. It was guarded because there happened to be a nice large American presence, which, and our military ships were in the area, but nobody had guns. And so it was guarded by the assurance of Western civility, but it was created by and for scientists. We need something very similar for the moon, because as I said, by 2018, there's going to be a lot of folks there. And whoever's there first gets to decide how the laws work. If by the time we get there, the Russians and the Chinese have been there for a decade, we're going to be using Russian law and Chinese law, not European law, not American law. So there's a lot at stake for us to make sure that the US, the Western powers, those of us who like entrepreneurship, those of us who like minority rights, those of us who like our Western privileges, and would like to see those extended to the universe and the solar system. There are a lot of reasons why we have a lot at stake in the next 7 years. So those are the 5 initiatives. So the 3 themes are this idea that we want to engage. The moon in particular is the one destination that everybody sees. Anywhere on planet Earth, everybody sees that target and that goal and that objective and that dream. And so it's uniquely among the planets suited to engage people from all over planet Earth. The second theme is that the nature of our understanding of reality in the universe and life in the universe is changing and already has changed. And that implies going back to the moon. It implies doing planetary science in a way that hasn't been done before. And the third theme here is these entrepreneurial opportunities, the technological opportunities, bringing the presence. And I'll end here with this story of, why is my mantra going back to the moon for all mankind? What makes me think we can do something for all mankind by going to the moon? In 1968, the first 2 personal computers flew to the moon. The Apollo navigational computers were the first personal computers. They were built for 1 or 2 people to use, and there were 2 of them, and they were about this big. 10 years later, 1978, I built an almost identical computer as my high school project. An MSI 8080, same clock speed, same amount of RAM, same form factor. It was an identical, same switch panel in the front. They had hex numbers and we had binary flip switches, but we were all entering numbers in hex. Same computer, 10 years later. We bought it for a few $1,000 and a handful of high school students built it. I think that kind of trickled down exponential growth is possible again. I think it will come by going back to the moon. So another thing that Bonnie will come back and talk about both today and tomorrow is a concept that we're calling WIN, what I need next. Collaboration accelerates exploration. One of our things is our events and the special interest groups are all about collaboration, working together, being open about what you need next, being open about asking for help, being open about asking for the things that are necessary for you to succeed. There is no shame in that. It's not common in the scientific community to talk about what you need. It's not common in government circles to talk about what you don't have. It's not common in entrepreneurial circles to admit you're not God's gift to Earth. But it's necessary for collaboration. It's necessary for progress. So we're looking for partners, we're looking for participants, and we're looking for sponsors. And so SETI, for example, will be a partner, and I suspect there are several partners in this room already. Everyone, this is a partner evening. And we're looking to grow our participation rate substantially. I think we now have a message and a vision and the ability to focus on our marketing to get much larger crowds to our events. We've been focused on the events so far, not the marketing. Now we know what the events are. We know we can run them. We know we have the best content of most of the events out there, certainly in our fields. Now we need attendance. Now we need marketing. Now we need messaging and visibility. And then to pay for that, to make that happen, we're going to need sponsors. So I'll be speaking with all of you in one way or another about all 3 of those themes and moving our project forward. So I'd like to thank you all for coming, all of those in this room, all of those on the internet, all of those listening to this recording whenever you're here. These things will still be what I need next for a long time to come, so please contact us. We'll be building out the websites and the other features over the course of the next year. Thank you very much.